Dusty's lonely ranch. Dusty Rivers narrowed his eyes against the glare, the persistent throb of loss, a familiar ache. A prairie wind, scented with sun-baked earth and the ghost of rain, swirled around him, offering no solace against the grief that clung like a second skin. His cattle, languid dots against the horizon, grazed with a sluggishness that mirrored his own existence since Lily's passing. He tipped back his weathered Stetson, revealing the map of hardship etched upon his face, a testament to toil and heartbreak. Dust devils danced around his boots as he ambled toward the water trough, each step a somber reminder of shared journeys across this very land, hand in hand with Lily, mapping out their future. Now, the ranch felt desolate, an empty vessel where vibrant life once overflowed. The clang of metal echoed harshly as he checked the trough's bracing. Even these rudimentary acts, once imbued with purpose, now felt like leaden weights. He yearned for the echo of Lily's laughter, the comforting pressure of her hand, the deep sense of belonging she had gifted him. Inside the house, silence amplified the emptiness. He poured coffee, the dark brew a swirling vortex in his scarred mug, and carried it to the porch. There, a sun-bleached photograph held Lily captive in a moment of impish joy, her smile radiant. He lifted it, his thumb, coarse with years, tracing the delicate curve of her cheek. "Mornin', Lily Bug," he rasped, his voice thick with unshed tears. Another day dawns. They just keep coming. Memory flared, a summer picnic by the creek. Lily, a splash of yellow in her dress, sunlight weaving gold into her hair. Their laughter a symphony, their love a tangible force. Now, just spectral echoes remained, a bittersweet symphony of what was gone. The porch swing groaned a mournful tune, its rusty chains a metronome counting out his solitude. The coffee cooled in his grasp as his gaze swept across his sprawling domain. A beautiful place, sculpted by their shared dreams, yet without her, it felt like gilded cage. High on a distant knoll, Daisy Bloom's young eyes were fixed upon him, her brow creased with worry. For days, she'd observed him, drawn to the palpable aura of despondency that clung to him. A stranger, yet she recognized the bitter taste of isolation. Her own life, though distinct, had known its isolating sting. She watched him cradle the photograph, noting the slump of his shoulders, the intensity of his gaze. She pictured him conversing with that image, sharing his soul with a phantom. Her heart ached in response. She knew the village whispered, labeling him a recluse, an oddity. Daisy saw beyond the facade. A good man, a decent soul, mired in grief. She couldn't remain a passive witness. She bit her lip, her mind racing. She was just a child, her opinions easily dismissed. Yet, she possessed an unshakable conviction that even the smallest hand could mend a tear in the world. He rose, his movements slow and weighted, and retreated inside, photograph in hand, swallowed by the house's dimness. The door clicked shut, leaving Daisy alone with her burgeoning plan. It was a harebrained scheme, audacious and likely to be ridiculed. Yet, she couldn't dismiss the conviction that it was the only course. She had to reach him, somehow, had to coax a flicker of light back into his shadowed existence. Drawing a fortifying breath, she straightened, her slight form outlined against the boundless sky. She started down the slope, her bare feet nimble on the uneven ground. A daunting task lay ahead and hearts to persuade. But her resolve was unwavering. She had hatched a plan, an improbable, outlandish plan, born of compassion and 3 simple words. "He's my husband." A storm and a shadow. The wind shrieked like a tormented spirit, clawing at the barn's time-worn facade. Rain hammered down, obscuring the world in a blurry gray wash. Jagged bolts of lightning slashed the heavens, briefly spotlighting Dusty's homestead in stark, ghostly brilliance. From the porch, he stood a somber figure silhouetted against the cabin's muted glow, his features carved with a sorrow deepened by the tempest. The wind's relentless roar echoed the turmoil churning within him. a constant reminder of grief's dominion. He'd done what he could to reinforce the barn, but years of decay, fueled by his own despair, had weakened it beyond repair. The aged timbers groaned under the onslaught, each gust a fresh torment. He knew it was a losing battle. Suddenly, a ferocious blast tore away a section of the roof, sending twisted metal spinning into the inky black. Dusty recoiled, a painful memory surfacing. Lily, her laughter ringing clear as they'd mended the same roof after a long-ago squall. Now, only silence remained, the echo of her joy consumed by the tempest's howl. When the storm finally relented, leaving devastation beneath a sky the color of a fresh bruise, Dusty ventured into the aftermath. The air hung heavy with the scent of damp earth and splintered wood. The barn lay in ruins, one side caved in, exposing its innards to the elements. The remaining structure leaned at a precarious angle, a testament to the storm's violence and his own apathy. He stood mired in the mud, the familiar weight of despondency crushing him. Restoration was beyond his reach, a task requiring resources, both physical and financial, that he simply didn't possess. It was just another wound added to the collection. As he turned toward the house, a figure materialized from the gloom. Silas Grumbles, his face a mask barely concealing his satisfaction, approached with a measured gait. Grumbles' property abutted Dusty's, and he'd made his intentions for the river's land abundantly clear. "Nasty night, Dusty," Grumbles drawled, his voice like oil on gravel. He surveyed the wreckage with a practiced eye, a glint of covetousness in his gaze. Dusty merely grunted, unwilling to offer conversation. He knew what was coming. "Looks like that old barn finally breathed its last," Grumbles continued, his tone bordering on celebratory. "Pity, real pity. This used to be a fine spread." Dusty remained mute, his jaw tight. "Tell you what, Dusty," Grumbles pressed, closing the distance between them. "Being the neighborly sort, and seeing as you're struggling, I'm prepared to make you an offer for the place." Dusty finally met Grumbles' gaze, his eyes holding weariness and a spark of defiance. "I'm not selling, Grumbles." Grumbles chuckled, a dry, grating sound. "Come now, Dusty. Be realistic. What are you going to do? Live in a dilapidated shack and watch the whole place crumble? You can't even keep the barn upright. I'm offering you a way out." He paused for effect. "I'll give you $20,000 for the lot. Land, house, everything." Dusty stared at him, incredulous. 20,000? An insult thinly veiled as an offer. The land alone held far greater worth, even in its ravaged condition. "That's daylight robbery, Grumbles," Dusty replied, his voice a low rumble. Grumbles shrugged, unfazed. "Take it or leave it, Dusty. It's more than anyone else will offer, especially now. Think about it. 20,000. Enough to make a fresh start somewhere. Leave all this sorrow behind." He gestured dismissively at the ranch, at the ruined barn, at Dusty himself. The unspoken accusation hung in the air. Grumbles wasn't just making an offer. He was exploiting Dusty's vulnerability, his grief, his obvious lack of resources. He saw Dusty's heartbreak as an opportunity to seize valuable land for next to nothing. Dusty suppressed a surge of rage. He refused to give Grumbles the satisfaction. He wouldn't let him see how deeply the man's barbs had sunk. "Get off my property, Grumbles," Dusty said, his voice flat and hard as granite. Grumbles grinned, a cruel line etched on his face that didn't reach his eyes. "Think it over, Dusty. The offer stands, for the time being." He turned and departed, his boots crunching on the gravel path, leaving Dusty alone with the wreckage and the encroaching darkness. The storm had passed, but a new, more sinister threat had taken its place. The old law. Dusty Rivers held his ground, the damp earth sucking at his boot soles. The mingled smells of damp soil and decaying wood hung heavy, a somber perfume. "My answer's still no, Grumbles. This land isn't for sale. Not to you, not to anyone." Grumbles' face, a map of fleshy folds, tightened with barely contained fury, his double chin trembling. "Don't be obtuse, Rivers. You're barely hanging on. That collapsed barn was an accident waiting to happen. You're a solitary voice crying in the wilderness. He swept a pudgy hand across the horizon. I'm offering you a way out. Ease and comfort. Consider it. Dusty spat, the gobbet landing with a wet smack, a physical manifestation of his grief, rage, and unwavering resolve. Comfortable? Living off your handouts? Lily and I bled for this place. Every rail, every pen. Her presence is woven into this soil. I won't let you turn it into some stinking feedlot. Grumble's eyes became slits, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. You'll rue this decision, Rivers. Remember my words. You will. He spun around, the crunch of his expensive boots on the gravel, a sharp punctuation to the threat as he marched back to his chrome-laden truck. Dusty watched him depart, a cold dread coiling in his stomach. Grumbles didn't accept defeat easily. He was a tenacious briar, strangling everything in its path. The following days blurred into a grueling cycle of repair. Dusty salvaged what he could from the ruined barn, his movements stiff, his soul leaden. Lily's absence was a tangible ache with each hammer blow, each nail driven. Evenings offered no solace. The silence within the farmhouse was a palpable weight, punctuated only by the wind's lament. Meanwhile, hidden within the dusty, nearly forgotten archives of the county courthouse, Silas Grumbles embarked on a different kind of labor. The atmosphere was thick with the mustiness of aged paper and bygone statutes. His sweaty finger traced the yellowed lines of a bound volume, his lips moving in a silent recitation. He scoffed at the antiquated phrasing, the archaic legalisms. He preferred the straightforward language of money, where rules bent at his whim. Yet, sometimes the past held unforeseen power. He dedicated hours to scrutinizing the town's original charters, deeds, and resolutions, ignoring the annoyed glances of the librarian, a severe woman hidden behind severe spectacles and an even more severe hairstyle. A bribe of chocolates had ensured her silence, enough to quiet her without arousing suspicion. At last his gaze snagged. A brief, almost insignificant clause, tucked away in a 19th century land ordinance. A vestige of a time when the town was desperate for settlers. Any homestead within the township limits, unoccupied by a married couple, shall forfeit half its acreage to the township for redistribution to families. A slow, predatory smile stretched across Grumble's face, his eyes glinting with wicked glee. Well now, he murmured, mostly to himself. Looks like Mr. Rivers has a predicament. He carefully copied the passage, his hand trembling with anticipation. This was it, his wedge. This obscure, time-worn law was the key to claiming the Rivers property. Days later, Grumble's truck churned up the dirt road to Dusty's farm, an arrogant smirk plastered on his face. Dusty was mending a fence, his brow furrowed in intense concentration. He glanced up as Grumbles approached, his eyes narrowing with suspicion. "What do you want, Grumbles?" A dry, grating chuckle escaped Grumble's throat. "Just a social call, Rivers. Seeing how you're faring. Heard about the barn. Pity." Dusty's hammer crashed against the fence post, the sharp sound echoing in the still air. "Spit it out, Grumbles." Grumbles produced a crumpled sheet of paper from his pocket and unfolded it with exaggerated deliberation. "I've been doing some historical research, Rivers, into this town's origins. Quite illuminating, actually." He cleared his throat and began to read the archaic law, his voice dripping with condescending triumph. Dusty listened, stunned into silence, his face draining of color with each syllable. He knew Grumbles was capable of many things, but this felt particularly insidious. Grumbles completed his recitation and folded the paper with a flourish. "So, you comprehend, Rivers? The law dictates, and it is the law, that unless you're occupied by a married couple, you forfeit half your land. And I rather suspect," he added with a glint of avarice, "that conjugal bliss isn't exactly at the top of your to-do list currently." Dusty stared, his eyes burning with a mix of fury and despair. He felt ensnared, trapped. Grumbles had located his most vulnerable point, preying on his loss, manipulating the legal system for his personal gain. "You can't be serious," Dusty croaked, his voice barely audible. Grumbles shrugged, a gesture of feigned nonchalance. The law stands, Rivers, and I fully intend for it to be observed. Unless, of course, he paused, his eyes shining with greed, you reconsider my offer for the entire property. At a considerably reduced price, naturally, given the changed circumstances. Dusty clenched his fists, his knuckles bone-white. The wind rose, whipping dust devils around them, silent witnesses to the impending conflict on the Rivers homestead. He knew he faced a formidable opponent, a man who would sacrifice anything to achieve his goals. And he knew, with growing dread, that this was only the opening salvo. Facing the trial alone, the summons sliced through the afternoon like a glacial wind, a stark white rectangle that chilled Dusty's weathered palm. Rivers versus Grumbles. It declared in unforgiving black ink, followed by the blunt command, appear before the county court to substantiate marital status. His pulse surged, a painful echo of his loss. He stared, the legalese a dizzying blur. Grumbles wasn't just trying to intimidate him. He was reveling in Lily's absence, weaponizing their shared past. He crushed the paper, then flattened it on the scarred kitchen table. Reason felt distant, lost in the tempest of sorrow and fury churning within him. He poured coffee, the acrid brew offering scant clarity. He drifted to the mantel, his gaze drawn to Lily's framed image, her smile radiating warmth. It was their wedding, a snapshot captured beneath the steadfast oak that marked their property line. She wore a simple frock, adorned with hand-picked blossoms, her eyes alight with a joy that mirrored his. A tidal wave of grief threatened to topple him. He recalled the comfort of her hand in his, the whisper of her breath as they swayed to a friend's fiddle. He remembered vows exchanged, dreams envisioned, all now fractured by fate's cruel hand. He reached out, tracing the curve of her cheek in the photograph. "Lily," he rasped, his voice thick with emotion. "What am I supposed to do?" Only the hollow echo of the house answered. The afternoon dissolved as he sifted through yellowed documents, seeking anything to bolster his case. Deeds, ledgers, policies, anything substantiating their union, their lives together. But the antiquated law Grumbles wielded demanded present proof. And Lily was gone. As dusk painted the room in somber hues, Dusty found himself again before Lily's likeness. He squared his shoulders, attempting a stoicism he did not feel. "All right, Lily Bug," he murmured, using his pet name for her. "Let's run through this one more time." He cleared his throat, rehearsing his planned courtroom appeal. "Your Honor," he began, a tremor in his voice. "I grasp the intent of the law, but its application here is flawed. Though Lily is no longer with us, our marriage, our bond, endures within me, etched into this very land." He faltered, the words sounding thin. How could he impart to a judge, a man bound by statutes, the vitality of a love that time could not extinguish? He raked a hand through his thinning hair, frustration bubbling. "This land," he pressed on, his voice gaining intensity, "is more than mere soil. It's our sanctuary, our existence. We shaped it together, brick by brick, dream by dream. To seize it now, it's a second death." He ceased, incapable of continuing. The words felt inadequate, fragile. He was grasping at straws, clinging to memories that held no sway in the eyes of the law. He studied Lily's photograph, her smile immutable, her eyes holding an eternal optimism he felt slipping away. Guilt gnawed at him, the sensation of failing her memory, failing to safeguard their shared creation. He dedicated the evening to preparing for court. He pressed his best shirt, the one she favored. He buffed his boots to a gleaming shine. He sought to embody integrity, to project the image of a man deserving of his legacy. Yet, as he lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, an oppressive dread settled upon him. He faced this ordeal alone, armed only with recollections and a love for a woman who could no longer stand beside him. Daisy's secret plan. Pressed against the mercantile's warped back door, the mingled scents of lavender and licorice swirled around Daisy. Mr. Grumble's usual booming voice had dropped to a hushed, sinister murmur. Rivers is done for, I tell you. The fool has nothing but wishful thinking and old memories. That land will be mine before the week is out. A shiver traced Daisy's spine. Grumble's words dripped with venom, hinting at ruin. She knew Dusty, a quiet soul, but good through and through. The notion of Grumble's seizing his land, Lily's legacy, twisted her gut. She melted away from the door as silently as smoke, her pulse a frantic drum against her ribs. The bell above the front door tinkled a cheerful greeting as she entered, a sound that felt jarringly out of place against the darkness she now carried. Agnes Sternwood, her grandmother, stood sentinel behind the counter, her face a roadmap of disapproval. Agnes's gray hair, scraped back into a severe bun, reflected the unyielding order she imposed on their lives. "Daisy, where have you been? I needed assistance with the fabric bolts." "Just outside, Grandma," Daisy mumbled, avoiding those sharp eyes. Agnes sniffed. "Were you lurking near the Rivers place again? I've told you to steer clear. That whole situation is distasteful. Best left alone." Daisy's jaw hardened. "But Grandma, Grumbles is trying to steal everything from him. It's simply not fair." Agnes's gaze narrowed to slits. "Justice will prevail, Daisy. The law will take its course. It's not our concern, and I forbid you from going anywhere near that ranch again. Is that clear?" Daisy nodded, the acquiescence a lump in her throat. How could she stand by and watch Dusty be destroyed? Agnes didn't comprehend. She existed in a world defined by rules and regulations, where emotions were suppressed, and every issue was solved with figures and cold logic. Later that night, long after Agnes had retreated to her room, Daisy slipped from her bed. The floorboards complained under her bare feet, each groan a potential alarm. She crept to the small wooden chest at the foot of her bed, the sharp, clean smell of cedar rising as she raised the lid. Inside, nestled amongst her few precious items, lay a worn leather pouch holding her meager savings, gleaned from mending clothes. It wasn't much, but all she possessed. She retrieved a sturdy canvas bag, normally reserved for wildflowers. Tonight, it would carry something far more crucial. A loaf of Agnes's fresh bread, a handful of dried apples, a thin blanket, and her warmest shawl. She also carefully included Lily's music box, the one Dusty had described with such tenderness. Perhaps it would offer him a flicker of solace. Hesitation flickered as her hand hovered above the bag. What if Agnes discovered her actions? What if she faced punishment? The chilling thought threatened to paralyze her. But the image of Dusty's despairing face, the echo of Grumble's cruel words, fortified her resolve. She must act. She had to help. She scribbled a hasty note on a scrap of paper, her hand shaking. "Grandma, I've gone into town. Back soon. Please don't worry." A lie, of course, but she lacked the courage to face Agnes's inevitable disapproval just yet. Bag slung over her shoulder, Daisy slipped out of the house, the cool night air a welcome balm after the oppressive atmosphere within. The moon, a silver disk in the black velvet sky, cast elongated, shifting shadows. She hurried onward, her small frame imbued with determination, her heart a battleground of apprehension and fierce conviction. She didn't know precisely what course of action to take, but she refused to passively watch Dusty lose all he held dear. She harbored a secret plan, a risky gamble, and she was prepared to play her hand. The courtroom drama. The courtroom chilled Dusty to the bone, a stark contrast to the summer heat outside. He perched uncomfortably on the bench, the mingled aromas of aged wood and legal precedent filling his nostrils. His weathered Stetson turned in his calloused hands, the felt worn smooth with years of use. Across the aisle, Grumble's self-satisfied smirk radiated an arrogance that soured Dusty's gut. Judge Abernathy, his face a palimpsest of judicial experience, entered. The sharp rap of his gavel cut through the hushed anticipation. Mr. Grumbles, his voice, like shale crumbling, commanded, "Proceed." Grumbles, adjusting his silk, not with theatrical flair, rose. "Your Honor," he drawled, his tone saccharine, We're assembled today because Mr. Rivers has disregarded his commitments under a legally sound agreement. Delinquent taxes, a blighted property. He's become a liability to this community. Dusty's fists clenched. Blighted? Every inch of that soil bore the imprint of his labor. Grumbles pressed on, his voice gaining a sharp edge. He pleads hardship, Your Honor, but I see negligence. A man incapable of managing his affairs forfeits any claim to valuable land. It's an insult to the diligent citizens of this county. He painted a portrait of Dusty as a feckless, incompetent wretch, bordering on criminality. Dusty fought the urge to silence him, knowing such an outburst would only validate Grumble's charade. He needed restraint, clarity. Finally, Grumble subsided, and the judge turned his gaze toward Dusty. Mr. Rivers, the floor is yours. Dusty rose, his boots thudding softly on the worn planks. He met the judge's eyes, then surveyed the assembly. Neighbors, their faces etched with apprehension. He swallowed, his throat suddenly parched. Your Honor, he began, his voice raspy, I won't sugarcoat it. Times have been hard. Losing Lily, it broke something in me. The memory, raw and vivid, lingered. He could almost catch the faint fragrance of her familiar lavender, feel the ghost of her touch. That land, he continued, strength returning to his voice. It was Lily's dream, woven as tightly with hers as it was with mine. We built that house together, stone upon stone, tilled those fields side by side. Every dawn, every dusk, we were there. It isn't just dirt and timber, Your Honor. It's our life. It's what she left me. He conjured memories of Lily's laughter echoing through the cottonwoods, her uncanny ability to coax life from the most unforgiving earth, her quiet strength that kept him grounded. He spoke of their shared ambitions, their future now shattered, irreparable. A ripple of soft sobbing spread through the onlookers. Even Judge Abernathy seemed affected, his stern expression softening imperceptibly. I know I'm behind, Dusty conceded, but I will make it right. Just grant me a little more leeway. I'll work till I drop. I'll trade sweat for every cent. That land, it's all that remains of her. He concluded, his voice thick with emotion, and resumed his seat. Silence descended, broken only by the rhythmic pulse of the courtroom clock. Judge Abernathy cleared his throat. Mr. Rivers, he said, his tone compassionate yet resolute, I acknowledge your sorrow, and I empathize with your position. Nevertheless, Mr. Grumble's assertion holds weight. The law is inflexible, and, according to the legal code, continued ownership hinges on your current marital status and maintenance of a family. Dusty's spirit plummeted. He had anticipated this moment, but the explicit pronouncement struck him like a physical blow. He stared at the floor, consumed by shame. He couldn't fabricate what didn't exist. Do you have any proof to offer, Mr. Rivers, regarding your current marital status? Judge Abernathy inquired, a hint of regret coloring his words. Dusty shook his head, the weight of his bereavement crushing him. No, Your Honor, I do not. Judge Abernathy sighed, a sound laden with weariness. He regarded Dusty, his eyes conveying a mixture of pity and understanding. In that case, he began, I am left with no recourse but to rule in favor of Mr. Grumbles. A surprising declaration. The courtroom air, heavy as a shroud, muffled every sound. A stifled cough, the scrape of a boot. Dusty Rivers stood rigid, jaw clenched so tight his teeth ached, fingers digging into the felt of his hat brim. He locked his gaze on a flaw in the wood paneling behind the judge, a desperate anchor against the storm threatening to engulf him. He felt the town's collective sympathy, a weight on his shoulders, yet no comfort at all. He was adrift, Lily gone, soon to follow, the land that held their history, each memory etched into its soil, every shared dawn, each loving promise. Judge Abernathy's throat-clearing echoed like a pronouncement of doom. He peered over his spectacles, his gaze lingering on Dusty with a hint of regret, a silent apology for the legal machinery grinding forward. Mr. Rivers, he began, his voice imbued with solemnity, The court has deliberated. While acknowledging the personal cost, the letter of the law remains. Lacking proof of wedlock or a direct heir, the courtroom doors crashed inward, splintering the hushed atmosphere. Every head whipped around. Daisy Bloom stood framed in the entrance, breathless, her cheeks ablaze with color, her normally serene eyes wide with a blend of fear and resolve. Loose strands of golden hair haloed her face, as though she had run headlong into a gale. Silas grumbles, smugly positioned in the front row, choked on his own spittle, his complexion darkening towards puce. "What is the meaning of this outrage?" he sputtered. Judge Abernathy silenced him with a cutting glance. "Miss Bloom," he said, his tone measured, "this is a place of order. Please show respect." Oblivious to the stir she'd caused, Daisy edged forward, her focus solely on Dusty. He returned her gaze, baffled, struggling to place her sudden appearance. It had only been the other day that she'd offered him pie. I apologize for interrupting, Your Honor," she stammered, her voice barely audible. "But I have to speak." A weary sigh escaped Judge Abernathy, betraying years spent navigating human drama. "Please proceed, Miss Bloom," he conceded, resignation shading his tone. Daisy drew a deep breath, squared her shoulders, and met the judge's eyes. Her voice, though still wavering, now held a surprising strength. The courtroom fell utterly silent, every gaze laser-focused on her. "He is my husband," she declared, the words reverberating through the space. A wave of whispers, louder and more incredulous than before, rippled through the room. Dusty Rivers remained rooted to the spot, his jaw slack, his mind reeling. What on earth was she playing at? Silas Grumbles exploded, his face contorted with fury. "This is an utter fabrication," he bellowed, slamming a fist down. "A desperate ploy to pervert justice. She's lying through her teeth." Judge Abernathy's gavel cracked down, demanding order. "Silence," he roared. "Miss Bloom, do you grasp the implications of your statement? You're under oath." Daisy nodded, her gaze unwavering. "Yes, Your Honor." "Ido." She turned towards Dusty, her expression beseeching. "Dusty and I, we married a few weeks ago. We planned to announce it later, once he'd had time to grieve." Dusty gaped at her, utterly speechless, a tempest of emotions swirling within him. Bewilderment, disbelief, a hesitant sprout of hope, and a profound disquiet. He couldn't fathom her motives, but he sensed the stakes were high, and he was, against his will, now a player in her game. A low hum of conversation erupted in the gallery. The townsfolk exchanged bewildered glances, their faces alight with a mixture of shock and morbid curiosity. The atmosphere, once thick with tense expectation, now vibrated with sheer pandemonium. A new kind of family. A hush fell over the courtroom, so profound you could hear the faint tick of the clock above the judge's bench. Silas Grumbles, usually a picture of smug confidence, now resembled a choked plum, his face a shade of purple bordering on apoplectic. Dusty's jaw hung loose as he gaped at Daisy. Daisy, what in the world? Daisy, however, stood firm, her spine straight, the high color in her cheeks amplifying the startling brilliance of her azure eyes. She closed the space between them, her small hand, roughened by labor, finding his arm. "I had to, Dusty. You needed someone too." Judge Abernathy, regaining his composure, cleared his throat, the sound amplified in the stillness. "Miss Bloom," he began, curiosity cautiously tempering his official tone. "Perhaps you could enlighten us as to the nature of this declaration?" Daisy inhaled deeply. "I've known Dusty for some time now, Your Honor. Since Lily passed. He's been adrift, utterly alone. No one should lose their spouse and then their legacy, particularly not when Lily poured her very essence into that ranch. I couldn't simply watch him be stripped bare." She met Dusty's gaze, her sincerity palpable. "I realize it's unorthodox, but I couldn't conceive of any other recourse. I reasoned that if he had a wife, or perhaps a guardian." Her voice softened, revealing a glimpse of vulnerability. Dusty's heart clenched. He saw the raw compassion radiating from her, the unselfish yearning to lighten his burden. Finally, words scraped their way out his throat, thick with emotion. "Daisy, you didn't need to do this." "Perhaps not," she countered, her grip on his arm firming. "But I desired to. Someone needed to stand up for you, Dusty." Judge Abernathy stroked his beard, his gaze considering. "Miss Bloom, your intervention is certainly commendable. However, this chamber deals in verifiable facts and established laws, not mere sentiment. We require concrete substantiation of this claimed marital bond." Daisy's face crumpled slightly. I possess none. It was purely a tactic to aid him." Dusty squeezed her hand. "There is no marriage, Judge. Daisy is a true friend, a generous soul, but she is not my wife." The judge sighed, the sound resonating with the weight of the legal predicament. He studied Dusty, then Daisy, before refocusing on the documents before him. "Mr. Rivers, my sincere condolences. The law is unambiguous. Absent proof of matrimony or a direct heir, the property defaults to the county." Dusty closed his eyes, the despair a tangible weight pressing down upon him. He had been so close, yet fate had snatched it away. Looking at Daisy, her eyes glistening with unshed tears, an overwhelming wave of gratitude surged through him. She had gambled everything on his behalf. "Thank you, Daisy," he murmured, "for trying." He turned to leave, but Judge Abernathy's voice halted him. "Hold your horses, Mr. Rivers. I haven't concluded." The judge steepled his fingers, his gaze sharp and unwavering. "Miss Bloom, you assert you acted out of a sincere wish to assist Mr. Rivers. Are you prepared to swear before this court that you will function as his guardian, ensuring his well-being and the sound administration of his property?" Daisy's eyes widened in surprise. "Guardian? But I'm hardly of age," Judge Abernathy finished, a hint of a smile playing about his lips. "The statutes contain no such age requirement, Miss Bloom. They only stipulate a responsible adult willing to act in the best interests of the ward. Are you willing to shoulder this responsibility?" Daisy searched Dusty's face, her eyes begging for direction. He offered a slow nod, a spark of hope flickering within him. "If you're willing, Daisy, I'm game." She took a steadying breath and faced the judge. "Yes, Your Honor. I swear it. I will be his guardian." Judge Abernathy nodded, a trace of satisfaction in his expression. "Very well. Based on Miss Bloom's sworn testimony and her acceptance of the role of Mr. Rivers' guardian, I hereby decree that Mr. Rivers shall retain ownership of his property under the legal guardianship of Miss Daisy Bloom. This court is adjourned." A low hum of discussion swept through the courtroom. Silas Grumbles sputtered in disbelief, but the sharp rap of Judge Abernathy's gavel silenced him. Dusty turned to Daisy, a potent cocktail of gratitude and bewilderment swirling within him. "Daisy, I'm at a loss for words. You saved me. But a guardian? What does that even entail?" Daisy shrugged, a hesitant smile lighting her face. "I suppose it signifies I get to tell you what to do and ensure you consume your vegetables." Dusty chuckled, the sound rough but authentic. "I reckon I can endure that. But in all seriousness, Daisy, thank you. For the very core of my being." He extended his hand. "Friends." Daisy clasped his hand in hers, her grip firm and comforting. "Friends." As they exited the courtroom together, an unlikely family forged in the crucible of crisis, Dusty couldn't help but speculate about what awaited him. He had secured his ranch, thanks to Daisy's daring and Judge Abernathy's unorthodox interpretation of the law. But he now also bore a new burden, a profound connection with a woman who had risked everything for him. And he sensed that his life, which had seemed irrevocably shattered, was about to become far more complicated and perhaps richer for it. Laughter returns. The silence that had clung to the Rivers ranch like morning mist began to dissipate. It started subtly, with a rhythmic clang of Dusty's hammer against the warped planks of the barn. He'd been putting it off, the barn. Every splinter, every rusty nail was a painful reminder of Lily, of the life they'd built together, brick by agonizing brick. But Daisy, bless her impulsive heart, wouldn't let him wallow. "Right, Dusty," she declared, her sleeves already rolled up, revealing surprisingly strong forearms. "Barn's falling down. Can't have that. Where's the lumber?" He'd pointed mutely, still reeling from the guardianship ruling, from the sheer audacity of her claim in court. He hadn't refused her help, though. He'd needed it, even if he wasn't ready to admit it, not even to himself. Daisy wasn't afraid of hard work. She attacked the barn with a fervor that both impressed and slightly terrified Dusty. She wrestled with planks twice her size, hammered nails with a surprising accuracy, and even managed to coax a reluctant, rusty hinge back to life with a combination of WD-40 and sheer determination. "You know," he said, leaning against a support beam, watching her struggle to align a particularly stubborn board, "you don't have to do this." Daisy paused, wiping sweat from her brow with the back of her hand, leaving a smudge of sawdust on her cheek. "And let you fall off the roof? Not a chance. Besides," she grinned, her eyes sparkling, "I always wanted to learn how to fix a barn." As the days turned into weeks, the rhythm of repair became a kind of therapy. Dusty showed Daisy how to select the right wood, how to angle a nail for maximum hold, how to listen to the groan of the old structure and anticipate its needs. She, in turn, brought a lightness to the work, a constant stream of chatter, of stories and observations that slowly chipped away at the wall Dusty had built around his grief. One afternoon, as they were taking a water break, Daisy pointed to the corral. "You know," she said, "I've never actually ridden a horse." Dusty choked on his water. "Never ridden a horse? Living out here?" She shrugged, unfazed. "City girl, remember? My idea of roughing it was camping in my backyard." Dusty stared at her for a long moment. Then a slow smile spread across his face. "Well, Miss City Girl," he said, "it's about time you learned." He started her off with gentle old Bess, a mare as patient and placid as they came. He showed her how to hold the reins, how to mount, how to communicate with the animal through subtle shifts in weight and pressure. Daisy was a natural. She picked it up quickly, her initial apprehension replaced by a growing sense of confidence and exhilaration. Soon, they were riding together every evening, exploring the trails that snaked through the hills surrounding the ranch. Dusty found himself pointing out landmarks, sharing stories of the land, of Lily, of their life together. He found himself talking about her, not with the crushing pain that had haunted him for months, but with a fondness, a gentle ache of remembrance. One evening, after a particularly long ride, they sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and purple. The air was filled with the scent of sage and the distant lowing of cattle. "Thank you, Daisy," Dusty said, his voice rough with emotion. "For everything." She looked at him, her eyes soft. "You do the same for me," she replied simply. Later that night, after a simple dinner of stew and biscuits, Daisy pulled out a battered old photo album. "Tell me about Lily," she said, her voice barely a whisper. And so Dusty did. He told her about Lily's infectious laugh, her unwavering optimism, her love of wildflowers, her talent for baking the perfect apple pie. He showed her pictures of their wedding day, of their travels, of their life together. Daisy listened intently, her eyes filled with warmth and understanding. She asked questions, not out of morbid curiosity, but out of a genuine desire to know and understand the woman who had been so important to Dusty's life. As he spoke, Dusty felt a weight lifting from his shoulders. Sharing Lily's memory with Daisy wasn't a betrayal. It was a celebration. It was a way of keeping her alive, not just in his heart, but in the life of the ranch. That night, laughter echoed through the rooms of the Rivers Ranch for the first time in a long time. It wasn't the same laughter that Lily had brought, but it was laughter nonetheless. It was the laughter of two people forging a new bond, a new kind of family, built on shared experiences, mutual respect, and a surprising amount of affection. The air in the old house, once heavy with sorrow, felt lighter, brighter, filled with the promise of something new. The scent of Lily's lavender still lingered, but it was now mingled with the earthy aroma of sawdust and the sweet fragrance of Daisy's perfume. a comforting blend of old memories and new beginnings.